Hello and welcome to this IELTS reading preparation tips video lesson. I'm IELTS Master Lee, and today I'd like to share an IELTS reading tip with you. How to practice reading fast and slow. If you don't understand what I mean yet, no problem. I'm going to tell you exactly what I mean in this video. So let's get started. First, I'd like to give you some basic advice for IELTS reading. To improve your IELTS reading test score, you need to improve your overall English ability. This is something you really need to understand. It's useful to know about the test, but only doing sample test after sample test after sample test after sample test will not help you much if you're only testing yourself. This is very common with some people. So if you're trying to take 20 sample tests before your IELTS test because you think that's the best way to prepare, sorry, but that is not the best way to prepare. You need to improve your overall English ability. Of course, knowing the test is important, and it's useful to know about the test, what kind of question types there are, what you can do to save time here and there. But if you're trying to jump from a 5.5 to a 7, for example, that's about your English ability, not about your test ability. All right. So in this video series, I am going to give you various tips on how to improve your reading test ability and also your overall English ability through reading. Some videos will focus on test techniques and others on general reading preparation advice. All right. I'm very excited for this IELTS reading video series, and I hope you are too. Let's get started with today's topic, reading fast and slow. So first, I'd like to talk about one technique that I call reading fast. Now, by fast, I don't mean like super fast. It doesn't need to be like skimming and scanning. I don't need skimming and scanning. I'm not talking about skimming and scanning, okay? I'm talking about first testing. Testing yourself, testing your own reading. When you first start preparing for the IELTS reading test, it can be good to take a few sample tests. Take 2 to 3 reading sample tests. This can help you learn what your current level is. IELTS reading sample tests are mostly not for improving your reading skill. They're for telling you about what level you are right now. And one more thing while I'm talking about sample tests can be very different in their levels and in how much you know about a particular topic. So don't just take one sample test and think, oh, I got a 7. That's not good enough. Take 2 or even 3 or sometimes 4. About 4 is the maximum you need to really understand this is about your level right now. Okay? You need to understand what your current level is. And you can time yourself during these tests. If you want to do the 60 minutes, you can do the 60 minutes. If you want to time yourself and see how long it takes you at a natural speed, you can do that too. But definitely mark how much time it takes you to complete each section. Write down how much time it takes you. Also, mark any questions that take you a particularly long time. When you're doing your sample tests, if you think you run into a really difficult question and it's taking you a long time, just make a small mark by that question, a small line or circle or something like that, so that you can go back later and look at this question and look at the question type and see, is it just this question? What is difficult about it? Is it the vocabulary? Is it the question type? Did you have trouble finding the answer in the IELTS reading passage? You need to examine what you're having difficulty with so you can understand what you need to improve your IELTS reading. And again, analyzing your speed and accuracy on certain question types can help you understand where your strengths and weaknesses are. This is why when people ask me, Lee, what should I do to improve my reading? I can't just answer, well, you should do this. There's no magic solution like that because everyone's strengths and weaknesses are different. Of course, there are some common themes. Most people that don't have a high reading score don't have a strong vocabulary, but if you really look in detail, then everyone has different strengths and weaknesses, and it's difficult to give advice that works for everyone. Finally, when possible, make sure you use high-quality reading texts from the Cambridge IELTS series. I'll include a link in the description. I recommend this book series just because they produce the highest quality sample tests. I've used other IELTS books, and in my opinion, compared to the other IELTS books, Cambridge IELTS series does a much better job, so that's what I recommend. All right, great. Next, let's talk about a reading slow technique. Now again, by reading slow, I don't mean reading slow. It's nothing like that. But I mean taking your time, not being in a rush. Don't worry about time. Instead of reading fast, I could write reading while timed for the last slide. And instead of reading slow, I could write reading while taking care to find new vocabulary. Reading tests are an amazing source of new vocabulary. After you've used an IELTS reading test for testing yourself, for doing the reading fast part, examine all of the vocabulary from it. Don't let the test go to waste. Make sure you look at the test and grab every piece of vocabulary you can get from it. All of these nice synonyms and antonyms and collocations, which are words that go together, and set phrases and high-level academic vocabulary. IELTS reading has fantastic vocabulary. And if you use your reading tests to improve your vocabulary, it will be wonderful. And your score will definitely go up in the future. If you just test yourself, sorry, your score is probably not going to improve that much. But if you take the reading test and you examine it and you grab all of the great vocabulary in it, then yes, in time, your score will definitely go up. All right? Next, take a look at our video lessons on vocabulary for academic reading for an example of how to use an IELTS reading test to find new vocabulary. Okay, I'll include a link in the description. Our next technique is another reading fast technique. But this time, it's not about the test. It's not about IELTS even. This is reading for pleasure. Now, by reading for pleasure, I don't mean that you should go out and read lots of fiction books. Well, if you like to read fiction books, okay, you can go read fiction books or novels or stories. That's fine. But since we're preparing for the IELTS test, you should probably stick to subjects that are likely to be on the IELTS, which include economics, history, science, these kinds of topics. So the more you read, the better your reading skill will become. And that's why I recommend you read for pleasure as well as for the IELTS. You definitely should use IELTS tests to help your vocabulary and help you understand your score. But in addition to that, you can also read articles in magazines, in science magazines, in economics, news articles, and things like that that can help your reading as well. There are many different free websites that have the kind of reading that will be on IELTS tests, and I'll include some down in the description of this video. Find articles that interest you, if you can, and read them for pleasure. If you don't find anything that interests you, if you're not naturally interested in IELTS-style topics like science or geography or history, well, choose which one you find the least boring, the most interesting out of your choices. Sorry, but the IELTS is the IELTS. They don't have super interesting reading topics usually, but sometimes they do, and hopefully you can find some reading that interests you. And if you can, find articles that have an audio version as well. Reading and listening at the same time is great practice as well. Of course, you don't want to do this every time because you need practice doing only reading, because that's what the IELTS is, but definitely, if you have the audio and you have the text in front of you, it can help you absorb the information and understand more words, more grammar, and just make the reading process more enjoyable as well. All right, so that's one reading fast tip. And again, we have the recommended websites down in the description of this video. Another reading slow technique is to read more than once. So reading something more than once can be very helpful for language learning. Read the same article 3, 4, 5, even 10 times if you can. The language will become more familiar to you and much easier for you to remember for your next test or even for your writing or your speaking. If you read something once, it's very likely that you'll read it and then you'll just forget it. But if you read it 4, 5, even 10 times, well, the chances of you remembering this language and being able to use it eventually are much, much higher. I know it can get boring reading 4, 5, or even 10 times. So again, if you can find an audio version of the text, well, then maybe you can read it once and then listen to it and then read and listen to it and then listen to it again and then read it again. And through this process, you can read the same thing many times and really remember these grammatical structures and the vocabulary and this great stuff that's in each article that you're doing. And again, just to reinforce the point, you will be able to remember the vocabulary and grammar from the article much better, and your overall reading skill will improve. So let's review, and I'll give you your action step for this lesson. First, read fast. Take IELTS sample tests sometimes to measure your current level, not to improve your reading skills. Next, read slow. Use old IELTS sample tests to learn new vocabulary and grammatical structures. And if you want an example for this, check out our vocabulary for academic reading video lessons. Next, read fast. Number 3, find articles that interest you and read them often for pleasure if you can. And then read slow. Reread the same articles or sample tests many times over and really, really understand it and try to remember it. If you want to memorize something sometime, you can do that too. And your action step for today, I want you to choose 2 of these methods, one fast and one slow, and do them both today. This is my challenge to you for this lesson today. All right? Can you do it? I really hope so. Let me know how it goes and tell me down in the comments. Did you do it? How did it go? Was it helpful for you? I want to know. All right? Thanks so much for watching this video lesson. I really appreciate it, and I hope it's useful for you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find us at youtube.com/IELTSmaster, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Thanks so much.